They told me my dog wasn't allowed in the neighborhood park. The HOA insisted that rules were rules, that my furry companion, Buddy, was a liability and didn't belong there. What they didn't realize was that I had plans that would turn their little rulebook upside down and give every dog owner the freedom they deserved. My name is Jason, and I've lived in this neighborhood for nearly 5 years. Buddy, my golden retriever, is more than a pet. He's family. Every morning, we'd walk to the local park, where neighbors and their dogs would greet us. Life was simple and peaceful until the HOA decided Buddy was the problem. It started with a letter slipped under my door, typed, stamped with the HOA logo. It read, "Dear Mr. Jason Miller, it has come to our attention that you have been bringing your dog into the community park, which is strictly prohibited by HOA regulations. Continued violation may result in fines or legal action." I stared at the letter, disbelief and frustration rising. Buddy had been visiting the park daily for years with no complaints. Other dogs were allowed. Other owners treated the space responsibly. Yet suddenly, we were being singled out. At the next HOA meeting, I confronted them. Buddy has been coming here for years without incident. I see other dogs all the time. Why single him out? The HOA president, a woman named Sharon, leaned back in her chair, arms crossed. "Rules are rules, Jason. You've been warned. We can't make exceptions." Another board member added, "It's for liability reasons. Someone could get hurt, and the HOA would be responsible." I realized arguing further was useless. Sharon had already made up her mind. I left, Buddy at my side, both of us upset and confused by their petty enforcement. Days went by, and I tried to reason with the board. Emails, polite reminders, offers to pay for extra insurance or signage. Nothing worked. The HOA remained dismissive. They weren't interested in fairness. They were interested in control. Then I started thinking differently. If the HOA wanted to dictate rules over a park they didn't fully control, maybe it was time to shift the power. I did some digging, reviewing property records, sale notices, and city documents. That's when I realized something important. The land the HOA claimed to regulate wasn't actually owned by them. It was private property, up for sale. The idea hit me like a lightning bolt. I could buy the park, not just take back control for Buddy, but for every dog owner in the neighborhood. I spent the next week contacting real estate agents, attending meetings, and confirming there were no legal restrictions preventing me from purchasing it. Sharon and her board had no clue. They continued sending threatening letters, insisting Buddy stay away, while I quietly moved forward with the purchase. Finally, the day came. I signed the deed. The park was mine, every inch of it. I could allow dogs, events, or whatever I wanted. The irony was delicious. Sharon had tried to enforce control over a space she didn't legally own. Now, she had no authority whatsoever. That evening, I called Sharon. "Hello, Sharon. Effective immediately. The park is privately owned by me. Your dog rules no longer apply. Buddy is welcome, along with every dog in the neighborhood." There was a long pause, then a faint, incredulous, "What?" "I said it's a dog-friendly zone now," I repeated. "You're welcome to visit, but you cannot enforce your old rules here." She sputtered, trying to argue. But I had the deed, city records, and legal documents ready to prove every word. Her authority evaporated instantly. The next morning, I installed a sign at the entrance. "Dog Zone. All well-behaved dogs welcome." Neighbors arrived with their pets, smiles wide, tails wagging. Children laughed as puppies ran freely. Sharon drove by, fuming, but there was nothing she could do. Legally, the park was mine. The park quickly transformed. Where once there were restrictions, there was now joy. Buddy ran circles with other dogs, and I watched, feeling both satisfied and relieved. Over the following week, Sharon tried to maintain appearances of control, sending emails and letters threatening fines. I simply replied with copies of my deed, city approval, and legal notes. The HOA had no claim, and the neighborhood began to see the absurdity of her actions. By the end of the week, the park was not only open, it had become a gathering space. Families brought snacks, neighbors met each other, and dogs ran happily without fear. The power of one simple act, standing up and taking legal action, was clear. I realized then that this wasn't about vengeance. It wasn't about showing off wealth or authority. It was about fairness, community, and ensuring that rules didn't punish people who had done nothing wrong. Buddy barked happily, running toward me as the sun began to set. The conflict that had started with one unfair letter had turned into something much bigger, a place for the community, a reminder that standing up against arbitrary rules could create positive change. The morning after I officially owned the park, I woke early, excited to see how things would unfold. Buddy ran ahead of me, sniffing every corner, as if he knew the rules had changed. I felt a mix of satisfaction and anticipation. Sharon and the HOA might not give up without a fight, and I wanted to be ready for whatever they tried next. By mid-morning, neighbors began arriving with their dogs. Some had been quietly frustrated with the HOA for months, and now they finally had a space to enjoy without fear of fines or confrontation. I smiled as children laughed, tossing balls and frisbees, and dogs barked joyfully. The atmosphere was completely different from the tense, restricted park we used to endure. Then I got the first email from Sharon. Her tone was sharp and accusatory. "Mr. Miller, this action is unacceptable. The park falls under the jurisdiction of the HOA. Your recent purchase does not override our regulations. You are in violation and could face legal action." I chuckled quietly and typed a calm reply. "Dear Sharon, thank you for your email. I have reviewed all documents carefully. The HOA has no legal ownership of the park. The property is privately owned by me, and all city regulations have been followed. Your prior rules regarding dogs do not apply here. You are welcome to visit, but you cannot enforce restrictions or fines. Regards, Jason Miller." I sent it without hesitation, confident that the law was firmly on my side. Predictably, she replied immediately, demanding a meeting with city officials to reclaim authority. I welcomed it. The meeting gave me the chance to confirm, publicly and legally, that the HOA had no claim over the park. Until then, the park remained open, and I documented every visit, recording dogs, owners, and interactions, just to prevent any future false claims. By that afternoon, Sharon showed up at the park in person. Her face was tight with frustration, and she carried a folder, perhaps hoping to intimidate me with paperwork. I approached calmly, Buddy wagging his tail beside me. "Jason," she said sharply, "we need to negotiate. The HOA has standards. Surely there's a compromise." I shook my head, keeping my tone calm. "Sharon, the park is privately owned. You have no authority here. The community supports this decision. Your rules do not apply, and any attempt to enforce them would be illegal." She tried again. "Liability issues, dogfights, cleanup. I've addressed all of that," I interrupted. "Insurance is in place. I have volunteers maintaining the park. The community is informed and supportive. Any further interference could result in legal action against you personally." Sharon hesitated. She glanced at the crowd of neighbors, many of whom were smiling or giving disapproving looks. Children called their dogs, and owners waved in my direction. Her power, which she had wielded so arrogantly, had vanished. I continued calmly. "This park is for the community. It's fair and safe, and it's now under my ownership. Attempts to bully or enforce rules here will not be tolerated." Sharon turned and left, muttering under her breath. The park remained full of activity, laughter, and energy. The neighborhood could finally enjoy the space freely. Over the next few days, word spread quickly. Families who had been hesitant to speak up were now showing up confidently. They brought blankets, toys, and treats, sharing them with other dogs and owners. The park became a hub of community interaction and joy. A few days later, the HOA tried to involve city officials. I attended the meeting fully prepared, armed with my deed, legal documents, and city confirmation. Every claim Sharon made about ownership, enforcement, and fines was easily refuted. "Mr. Miller," a city official said, "you are the lawful owner of the park. HOA rules do not apply to privately owned property. The dogs may remain, and any attempts by the HOA to enforce restrictions here would be considered harassment." Sharon's face went red with embarrassment. She had tried to use bureaucracy and intimidation to enforce control, but the law clearly favored me. I stayed calm, letting the evidence speak louder than her frustration. Returning to the park that afternoon, I saw neighbors celebrating the victory. Dogs ran in every direction, children laughed, and everyone expressed their relief and happiness. The space that had once been controlled and restricted was now vibrant and alive. I realized then that this wasn't about vengeance. It wasn't about proving I had more power than the HOA. It was about fairness, community, and ensuring that no one was punished unjustly. Standing up for what is right, even when it seems small, can transform a whole neighborhood. The following week, I helped organize volunteer maintenance. Neighbors took turns helping with cleanup, planting flowers, and even setting up small agility courses for the dogs. The park was thriving, and the community felt ownership and pride. Sharon remained on the sidelines, attempting to assert influence, but she was largely ignored. Residents had witnessed firsthand that her authority was arbitrary, and no one wanted to follow rules that had no legal or ethical basis. Buddy ran happily in circles, greeting every dog and neighbor. Watching him, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction. The park was no longer just a place for dogs. It was a symbol of standing up against unfair authority and making change through knowledge and preparation. Even new neighbors took notice. "We heard about what happened," one said, smiling as they opened the gate. "It's amazing to have a park like this. Thank you for making it possible." I nodded, patting Buddy's head. It wasn't just me. The community wanted this space. I just made sure the rules didn't prevent it from happening. By the end of the month, local news picked up the story. The headline read, "HOA tries to ban dogs. Resident purchases park to make it dog-friendly." The coverage praised fairness, legal knowledge, and standing up against petty authority. Sharon and the HOA's attempts at control became a cautionary tale for anyone trying to abuse minor authority. The park was officially mine, and the neighborhood had embraced it fully. But I knew Sharon and the HOA wouldn't accept defeat quietly. Their pride had been bruised, and people who thrive on control rarely step aside without a final struggle. The following morning, I arrived at the park early. Buddy bounded ahead, sniffing every corner, as if he could sense the freedom that now belonged to us. Families started arriving soon after, each carrying leashes, toys, and treats. The park was alive again, filled with laughter and barking. It was everything it had been meant to be, and more. Around mid-morning, Sharon pulled into the parking area. She stepped out of her car with an expression somewhere between anger and disbelief, carrying a thick folder she clearly intended to use as intimidation. I watched calmly, Buddy wagging his tail beside me, and waited for her approach. "Jason," she said sharply, "we're not done. I've brought documentation proving the HOA still has authority over community spaces. We need to negotiate rules for the park. This can't continue like this." I smiled, remaining calm. "Sharon, I've already reviewed all applicable documents. The park is private property. You have no authority here. Your rules do not apply, and any attempt to enforce them would be illegal. I welcome you to visit as a guest, but you cannot dictate terms." She tried to argue, but liability issues, dogfights, cleanup, "I've addressed all of that," I interrupted. "Insurance is in place. Volunteers maintain the park. The community supports this. Any continued interference on your part could result in legal action. For the first time, I noticed hesitation. Sharon glanced around at the neighbors who were watching, many of them shaking their heads or giving disapproving looks. Children called their dogs, who ran past her without fear. Her power, which she had wielded for months, had vanished completely. I continued, calmly but firmly. This park is for the community. It is fair and safe, and now under my ownership. Attempts to bully or enforce rules here will not be tolerated. Sharon muttered under her breath, then turned and left. The crowd of neighbors erupted in applause, clapping and cheering. It was more than a legal victory. It was a triumph of fairness over intimidation. Over the next few days, the neighborhood rallied even more strongly around the park. Families organized playdates, brought snacks and toys, and volunteered to help maintain the area. The park became not just a place for dogs, but a hub of community interaction. People who had previously been quiet or fearful now spoke up, and the sense of unity was palpable. I also set up a small fund to ensure the park remained clean and well-maintained. Neighbors contributed, understanding that the space now belonged to all of us, not just a single owner. The park had become a true community asset, and the HOA's attempts to assert control seemed increasingly absurd. Sharon tried a final move. She sent letters threatening fines, claiming I had violated HOA rules by hosting events in the park. I calmly responded with copies of the deed, legal documents, and city confirmation. Each letter was dismissed, and Sharon's credibility within the neighborhood eroded rapidly. By the end of the week, the park was thriving. Dogs ran freely, children laughed, and neighbors talked openly. Buddy chased frisbees and made new friends every day. The park had become a place of joy, freedom, and fairness, something the HOA had tried to suppress but could no longer control. The local news eventually caught wind of the story. Articles praised the fairness, legal knowledge, and community spirit that had prevailed over petty authority. Headlines like "Resident Turns HOA Dog Ban into Community Victory" and "Neighborhood Park Now Dog-Friendly Thanks to Legal Action" spread the story widely. Sharon and her HOA were portrayed as overreaching and arbitrary, a warning to anyone trying to misuse minor authority. Even new neighbors noticed the difference. "We heard what happened," one said, smiling as she entered the park. "It's incredible to have a place like this. Thank you for making it possible." I nodded, patting Buddy's head. It wasn't just me. The community wanted this space. I just made sure unfair rules didn't prevent it from happening. The park had transformed into more than a place for dogs. It was a symbol of standing up to unfair authority, using knowledge, preparation, and calm strategy to restore justice. The small act of purchasing the park had turned into a lasting legacy for the entire neighborhood. Sharon and the HOA, meanwhile, were reduced to observers. Their authority had been challenged, their reputation suffered, and the neighborhood no longer feared their arbitrary rules. For once, fairness had won. As the sun set, I sat on a bench, watching Buddy lie in the grass, tired but happy. Children called to their dogs, neighbors chatted and laughed, and a sense of peace settled over the park. I realized that the entire ordeal, while frustrating, had created something far greater than the park itself, a space where fairness, freedom, and community thrived. The lesson was clear. When rules are applied unfairly, knowledge and decisive action can restore balance. Authority without fairness is temporary, and standing up to it can create lasting change. From that day on, the park remained a sanctuary. Dogs and owners alike enjoyed the space, free from arbitrary restrictions. Sharon faded into the background, her attempts at control remembered only as a cautionary tale. And for me, Jason, the joy wasn't just in owning the park. It was in seeing the community flourish, witnessing the happiness of neighbors and their pets, and knowing that standing up for what's right can change more than just one corner of the world. It can change an entire neighborhood. Buddy barked softly, wagging his tail, as if acknowledging the victory. I laughed, realizing that sometimes the smallest companions can inspire the biggest victories. The HOA had tried to dictate unfair rules, but the combination of patience, preparation, and action had turned their authority into nothing more than a footnote in our community's story. The park, once a symbol of restriction, had become a symbol of fairness, community, and resilience. And that, more than anything else, was worth every challenge we had faced.